Welcome to another edition of Turn 6 Garage, and today we're driving a new car, a 2023 Volkswagen T-Roc. Now this is the Volkswagen T-Roc R-Line, priced at $45,000 excluding government charges, and is one of the gaggle of small SUVs populating the marketplace under $50,000. Now this specific T-Roc is powered by a 2-litre inline 4-cylinder engine with 141 kilowatts of power. It's a little SUV, but it has the same sort of power output as an old Golf GTI, so it should be interesting. So when you first look at the T-Roc, it's quite an interesting looking car from some angles. It's got very nice swoopy lines on the back, but from some angles it looks kind of staid and typical Volkswagen. Looks like a lot of other Volkswagens. So it's sort of individual, but it sort of isn't. It's okay, but nothing more. The interior is an interesting place to be. The seats are reasonably comfortable, but it's got these touch-sensitive controls for the climate control and for the steering wheel controls. When I first got into this, I felt kind of bamboozled by them. It's kind of unusual when you're used to buttons, but it's something you can easily get used to. On the downside, the interior is a little bit bland in terms of design, but it's got all the features and all the screens that all the modern buyer would ever want. It's got all the features that your average SUV buyers come to expect over the last 5 years. So, it does its job. In terms of rear accommodation, the headroom is a little chopped if you're my size, and the boot is okay, but not brilliant. But it is a small SUV, and for what it is, it's not bad. So, its styling is okay, its interior is okay. What's it like to drive?
Dynamically, the T-Roc is a really good car. Better than you would think out of an SUV like this. And in many ways, I sort of see this as a somewhat more practical and somewhat more saleable Polo GTI. In the way, it's similar performance to the Polo, although it is 0.4 of a second slower, it's a bit bigger on the inside, albeit the boot's a little bit small for what it is. But I see this thing as a sort of fun SUV that you can enjoy to drive. It's a small I see this thing as a small SUV you can actually enjoy driving, which is really good. The performance of this car off the line and in gear is fantastic. Volkswagen have really done a good job setting this thing up to have a lot of torque low down, so it pulls quite well up hills, it gets off the line really well. It's surprising. It does perform like an old Golf GTI. These things start at 45 grand for the R-Line 140 in question. Now I'll go through pricing and specification later, but that's the same money as a Mark V Golf GTI DSG was new in 2008, 2009. Well, kind of is a sort of somewhat more practical yet somewhat more modern buyer-friendly Mark V GTI. That's what I kind of see this as. It's the same performance with the Mark V or Mark VI, because they're not that much different in performance, only it's more of a practical choice. I'm surprised. When I got this in this thing, I thought, it's another bloody SUV, it'll be terrible to drive, miserable, wonky dynamics. It's not. And for those of you who want reasonable performance that you can use on the road in a package that is palatable to someone else, that's not some crazy Larry hot hatchback, this thing could really work if the person you're buying this car for isn't really a petrol head. Then you can slip this one through and still enjoy it. Now the R badges do sort of give away its performance, but buy it in a discreet colour with discreet options, and no one will really know how quick this thing really is. As long as I would personally debadge it and make it look like just an ordinary T-Roc until you put your foot down. Are there any gripes in this thing dynamically? The gearbox is definitely the gripe for me. It feels like a clutchless manual, because it is. And It's not quite the Sensonic Saab territory, but you got the sense that the person who designed the Sensonic Saab probably had something to do with this transmission in the way it feels, and all dual clutches for that matter, and the design of them. Other thing that I have a bit of a gripe for is the ride. It's a bit hard. Now, that doesn't come as a surprise, being a Volkswagen with this sort of a setup, more sporty type setup. The ride, naturally, in a lot of these cars I've driven, whether it be an Audi or a Golf GTI or one of the Beetles, the suspension setup is on the firmer side. It's definitely noticeable. It's something that I'm used to, having driven these cars for a while, but if you're coming out of it from something else, you're going to notice the ride's a bit harder. That's just the way they choose to set them up. However, the gripes I have here aren't especially plentiful. If you got in a T-Roc R-Line and drove it, you'd like it. It's not a bad car by any stretch of the imagination to drive. You can really, really enjoy this thing, throwing it around. And even driving it at slow speeds, it's not a bad car. So, it definitely ticks the box in terms of driving dynamics.
So as a package, the T-Roc is quite a decent small SUV. And it's not a bad car to drive, it looks okay, it feels okay. So, if you're looking for a small SUV that you're going to lease for the next 5 years and replace, this is definitely on your consideration list. I think it's a reasonable car for what it is, and it ticks the box of a small SUV pretty well without being a complete piece of junk to drive. So, that's a plus. However, the one thing that bugs me with this car is the cost of the car once you start adding options. So, a base T-Roc, when you add government charges in, comes out to the high 40s depending on which state you're in Australia. When you start adding options, this thing can get as high as $60,000 for the 140TSI R-Line. So I would keep it basic. Now, this specific example has the panoramic sunroof. In its current configuration, it's about $54,000 on the road. That is a bit of money. And that, to me, would dissuade me in a way because a Polo GTI is less money and is more fun and faster. So I'd go for that over a T-Roc, but I understand the allure of this car. It's definitely in fashion right now and people want them. The next thing I say with this car is the reliability or questionable reliability moving forward. Once the car gets beyond a certain age, Volkswagens haven't really shown their durability in the last 15 years. So this one would be a car I'd keep as long as the warranty lasted. Once the warranty ended, I'd trade up and buy another one. Having owned these cars and understanding the reliability of some of the componentry and the quality of the componentry going into the car, that's where this question lies. What will this thing be like after 5 years and after the warranty is done? Only time will tell, but it's something worth thinking about if you're going to keep it long term. Overall, for what this car is, it represents a very good package. The T-Roc 140TSI R-Line is definitely a small SUV you can enjoy driving. And it's a car that you wouldn't be embarrassed to own, and it's something that is in fashion right now. So, if you're looking for this kind of car, then give the T-Roc a drive. It'd be worth a go. If you're looking for value for money, then maybe not so much. However, for a small SUV, it's a decent buy, if this is what you are after. Once again, thanks to Bayford Volkswagen Camberwell for loaning me this car.